land of geese, not too far from King Wulfgar, land of Danes, lived a man named Beowulf. Beowulf was only a young man, but already had won fame on account of his goodness and daring. In his person, Beowulf was below average size. He looked taller sitting down than standing up, because his broad chest and shoulders were all out of proportion to his legs, which were short. He had straight brown hair and strong wrists. Pete found it difficult to say what was memorable or remarkable about his face, but all remembered it. He had a way of looking straight at a person in his talking to. His shoulders were square, his hands on his knees, his eyes unwavering. That always struck others as honest and open. And when someone spoke to him, he sat just as still and attentive, listening with his eyes. In fact, Beowulf's eyes were not strong, and part of their sensitivity was due to his not seeing too well. As a boy, he had been fond of playing with bees. Beowulf means the bee hunter, and one day an angry swarm had attacked his face, stinging his cheeks and eyelids rather badly. A setback like this did not daunt him. He did not even blame the bees. Beowulf was the rare kind of person who makes strength of his own weaknesses. His eyes being poor, he determined to see not just as well as other people, but better than most. He did this by cultivating habits of quickness and concentration that enabled him to be truly seeing where others were only looking. Beowulf had made the best of all he had, putting each imperfection to work in the service of his integrity. Meaning, integrity is doing something right even when you're not looking or someone else is not looking. Thus, his real strength lay in the balance of his person, which is, perhaps, another way of saying that he was strong because he was good, and good because he had the strength to accept things in him that were bad. When Beowulf had heard all of the stories about the dreadful deeds of a demon Grendel, he determined to go and help Harthog or Hrothgar if he could. His ship was made ready, a fine, seaworthy craft with a great curved plow. He chose 14 men to go with him. However, it was not merely for their skill as warriors that Beowulf picked them. He had heard enough about Grendel to know that the monster cannot be killed by strength alone. When Beowulf and his men arrived in Hrothgar's land, the coast guard soldier greeted him. "If you take my private advice," he added, "you'll pack back in your ship before you're killed. Fighting that monster, why, it's like fighting the sea. You can't win." Beowulf's men muttered angrily among themselves. They found the coast guard's words insulting. Beowulf did not seem insulted. He looked out over the rolling waves as though considering what the coast guard had said. "Thank you for your advice," he said at last, "but I will not take it." The coast guard shrugged. "Then you are either the brave or stupid. Come on, I will lead you and your men to Herat. I doubt very much whether you will come and back. Come, I very, I doubt very much whether you will come back, any of you, if it's really Grendel you're after." The men clanked along, uncomplaining, in single file behind the coast guard's horse. Beowulf looked about him as he marched, taking everything in. Tall cliffs and deep valleys, each tumbling, stemmed stream and pebble, winking brightly in the sun. His head moved on his shoulders like a bird's, alert, inquisitive, and shrewd. Before long they came in sight of Herat. The shining of the place astonished them. He stood like a tower of solid gold. Behind it shrouded his mist. Even on a day like this lay the fin. Then Beowulf, perhaps because of his short sight, his whole Herod appeared even brighter than it was, and the rest of the place darker. Then Beowulf thanked the coast guard for showing them the way that led his men along the winding stone road to Herod. The coast guard watched them go, thinking how brave and doomed they looked, until they were all so far away that he could no longer hear the clinking of the armor. He saw that Beowulf had left his sword stuck on top of the mound. It shone in the sunlight like a cross. King Hrothgar had stirred by the telling of such brave deeds. He was a warrior at heart, and here was something he could easily understand and appreciate. He commanded his servants to prepare a banquet fit for a hero. The feasting and drinking went on for hours. Only Unferth did not join in. He sat in a corner. Long shadows crept into the whole Harriet. Night was coming on. Some of the Danes grew restless and apprehensive. His eyes kept returning to the door. Wulfgar said to Beowulf, "You are determined to face Grendel, come what may." "I am," said Beowulf quietly. "What is your plan?" "The best plan," said Beowulf. "No plan." Wulfgar shook his head. "You're the bravest man I have ever met," he said, standing up in salute his chest, his guest. "If anyone can kill Grendel, it is you." He suddenly noticed something about Beowulf that had escaped his attention before. "Where's your sword?" he asked. Beowulf shrugged. "My sword? Oh, I left it in the sun somewhere. I need no sword." "No sword? But how? Does Grendel use a sword?" demanded Beowulf. "Of course not. But he will eat." "Have swords been any good against him in the past?" Beowulf pursued relentlessly. Wogard had admitted that he had not. But he could not see how one man, however, go on good and strong, dare face and fiend without weapons. Beowulf held up his hands. "Here are weapons enough," he said. "I put more trust in these 10 fingers than in 100 swords." But still, he watched, he waited. Then, as dawn began to drain the dark, a man heard a sound. It was a sound like the breaking of ice underfoot. It came quick, and it was gone again. Beowulf stood up. His voice rang through the raffled or the rattered hall. "Grendel!" he cried. "Grendel, child of Cain, come down into my Heriot. I am Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow. I am Beowulf, not afraid of you. I am Beowulf, come to kill you." Before Beowulf could move, those claws snatched up one of the warriors stirring out of the sleep. In a minute, all that was left was of the men of the man was a frayed mess of veins and entrails hanging from the monster's mouth. But all at once the light had caught him, and he had him by the claw. It was Beowulf. The creature gave a dreadful squeal as Beowulf touched him. 10 strong fingers locked about in his hairy wrist. To Grendel, it was as if the sun itself had caught him in his clutch. Grendel had never known strength like this. He roared and shook to be free, to claw away, to escape into the ruins of the night. But Beowulf would not let him go. Grendel grew angrier and angrier. He shook his arm about and dashed it against the wall. Beowulf, badly bruised, refused to relinquish his hold. When shaking did not work and banging did not work, Grendel cried, jerking his arm. But Beowulf wound his legs round the pillar. He took his full force of the monster's pull and still held on. There was a fearful snapping of bones and tearing of sinews and muscles. Beowulf had pulled Grendel's arm out of socket. The monster howled. It was a pandemonium of pain, as though all the men he had eaten cried out. He dragged himself along the ivory floor, blood pumping from his wound with each fierce beat of his angry heart. He knew he must die from loss of blood. Beowulf let Grendel go. He listened to the hideous howling and dying away across the fen. The light grew stronger. The sun lit all the windows of the hall Harriet. Beowulf's men crowded round him. It was some little time before they realized the full extent of their hero's victory. Beowulf was bruised and bloody, and his cheeks were thick with slime of off the monster's body. But when he hung Grendel's torn out arm from the hook in the rafters, all the Geats burst out cheering. It was a foul green scaly with a tangle of blood soaked hair at the wrist, and sharp claws where the fingers should have been. Nobody liked to touch it, but everyone looked.